Hi everyone, welcome to Launchpad by Newton School. This is a platform to learn the courses which are ready, which make you industry ready for free. So this is a course about React, Introduction to React, and myself Nitin Jain, and I work at Property Loop as a full stack developer. So, welcome to lecture two. Yesterday, we gave a brief introduction about what React is and what are the features of React and why we use React and like internal working, how React makes something very faster, like web applications faster, and what are the other uses of the React that we could have. So, in this lecture, in the lecture two, what we're going to do is we're going to create a first React app and learn about something called as component in React and state and props, and also learn how we can make multiple page React application. So let's get started. So for creating first React app, we have to follow some steps. So this is VS Code. If you are familiar with VS Code, that's good. If you're not familiar with VS Code, it is an IDE which will like it's an open source IDE from Microsoft and allows you to write code in any language and any framework, whatever you want. So basically what happens is it's basically a text editor, and you have a bunch of extensions which can be installed in this to like extend its capability for your preference and for your workflow. So the that was about the VS Code. So basically to create a React app, you have to have a Node.js installed on your system and npm also. So just I'll show you quick steps to how to do those. Just a second. So we will search Node.js on Google, and we'll go to download page. What this will do, you have to select whatever operating system you have. If you have Windows, Mac, select the appropriate packages for your platform and download them. Once you download them, it will depend on your platform. It will download the specific binary files which will be specific to the platform. Install it. So basically, when you install it, it will install Node and npm both on your machine. So just to check whether Node and npm install or not, go to the command line. If you're a Windows user, you can go to command line by using Windows R and then typing cmd in it, or using the start menu and typing cmd in that. So by typing cmd, you will be greeted to this. If you're a Linux user, you can use Ctrl-Alt-T to go to the terminal, or for Mac users, Ctrl-Alt-T works same. So just to check whether Node is installed or not, we will do is node-v, and if Node is installed, it will give us the version which is currently installed. And if you have to check npm, it will be npm-v. It will also give the version of npm. So basically, what npm is, npm, if you are familiar with package managers on, like if you have ever worked on systems like Mac or a Linux, there is a package manager to install certain stuff directly from the command line. So that's basically like if everybody has a smartphone. So basically, what it is a Play Store or an App Store. But you can access it by command line also. So it does not have any UI. If you want to have like go check it, it do have a website, but it does not have an like a graphical user interface. So basically, if you want to check what an npm website is something like this. So this is npm. And whenever you want to install something, you have to run command npm install and whatever the package name is. Or if you want to have a short form of it, you can do is npm i. So this was the basic. If you don't know about Node or NPM, if you want to learn more about Node and NPM, there might be a course on Launchpad where you can learn more about Node and what is Node and what is NPM and other different stuff regarding that. So let's just make a directory here to start an application. So just my first React app. So what this will do, this will create a directory named my first React app and hit enter. And we will just now move to the directory. We are now in the directory. So what you can do is there is a command in npm called npx. Now what this x means here, x means is temporarily download a package. Do not install it. Just download the package, run it once, and nothing else. Your system will not have that package installed. It will just for temporarily download it and give you access to it, whatever you want to, and do with it. And after you're done with it, there is no nothing like present there. So why we do this? Because some things are like what we're going to use is called a boilerplate script or a boilerplate module. What a boilerplate module is? It basically is a module which setups everything for a project. So for React, we need multiple things to set up. So we can set it manually, but it takes way more time and it's way complicated. And if something goes wrong, you have to debug it multiple times, and that's a hard process. And it is very advanced for beginners also. So why we are doing this is because the boilerplate script gets updated many times. So if you just install it in your system, like by doing npm install and the script name, which is create react app. Now, if you do this, it will install it, then you can run it as a command. But the problem is every time it is upgraded, you will not have the upgraded version. So what you have to do is either upgrade it every time you have to create a new React app, or otherwise you could use a better version, which is recommended also, npx create React app. Now, what create React app is, it creates the boilerplate code that is required. It is the base code that is required, like base setup regarding many multiple modules and package managers and everything. It will just bundle them and create them, and just for your use and for your ease. You do not have to do anything. You can just start writing the code right away. You don't have to do any configuration changes. You can just start your application right away. Now, what it needs is the directory name. Is the directory name where it should create your React app project, or just create the files, whatever you are, whatever the files that it creates. So there are the basic syntax is dot. What dot means is you want to create the React app in the same directory that you are in. But if you don't want to create a React app on the same directory that you are in, you can type in the directory like my React app. Since I want to create in the directory which I'm in, I will type in dot and I will enter it. So it will do some installing portions, and so it takes a lot of time. So basically, I have done this process previously for our code base. Just so in this, I have run the same command. What you will be getting is first, when you run this npx react create app, it will install the create react app. Sorry, it will download the create react app and then run it also with the dot command. With the dot means the current directory. And after that, it will the create react will take over and run whatever the things it has to run. And after it successfully is done, if it is successfully done, it will print out something like these commands. So just to give a brief description, what are those? It is npm start. Npm start means these are the commands which you will be using for your starting your React application, testing your React application, or building it for production. React application, building it production. So what npm start does is npm start is just basically what it does is create starts a local server on your machine, and it is by default it is localhost 3000 port. And if 3000 port is not available, if port is busy by some other process, it will ask you about do you want to start it on another port. Okay, so this is the most used command. Like if you are doing development on the local machine, you will run this every time. Whenever you have to start your React application, you have to do npm start. Okay. Now, suppose you have built whatever your application you wanted to build. Now you have to deploy it on some server and connect it with domain and all those things, so that other user also can use, because your local if it is running on localhost, you can only use it, not everybody else in the world can use it. So what you will do is npm run build. What this will do is create some static js files. So what we call them is a bundle. Bundle is whatever your code is in the source directory. This source directory, I will get back to this in more detail about what the source directory and what it contains. So whatever is in the source directory, you will it will compile it. It will make it into our big JavaScript file. So if you look into Instagram code, or if you have done like, if we go to let's say Instagram, uh, and look at its source code, it will have way a big large chunk of files. Uh, these things that we are seeing, these chunks, big chunks of file, these bundles, these are the bundles that were created when they run npm run build or whatever the command they had for building, to build their app and to deploy it on the server. So these are the big JavaScript files that are made. If you look into these files, they'll be like basically big chunk of JavaScript code, not matching whatever the code you written in your React app, because it is compiled by React into some form that is like easily understandable by browser, because browser does not understand React. Browser understand only JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Browser does know what React is. We compile it into something that what browser understands. So what happens is when you run build, it will compile your app into JavaScript code, which browser can understand, and then you can deploy this code and somewhere some server which is connected to some domain, and then any user can access it. Now this npm test command is basically whenever you write a code, you also write tests for it. What test does is validate whether the code runs in every scenario that it should have run. Like if you have a button click, okay, now that button click should only happen one time. Like a user can only click it one time. Now, but the code is written in some, but you have to make sure that it happens. There are two ways. You can do is manually check on the browser. That's a way. But whenever, suppose in future you made some changes and you wanted to like happen two times but not three times. So then you have to do that thing manually every time, so that would be a painful process. This is a simple, it was simple, just a button click. So you might think it's an easy task, what I have to do, nothing much. But think about it, when you're working somewhere or when you're doing some big project, you can't do this same thing for each and every project. So what test allow us to do is we write whatever we were testing manually, we write in some testing module that the code should have performed this when it was given the input. So if any time in the future when that code changes and changes in a way that it's it has changed functionality. Like in our case of button click, it is from one to now it has moved to two. So our test, what the test will do is allow us to do is test will fail, because test was written to just only allow one button click. So test will fail. What it will remind us to do two things: write updated tests, and also it will also allow us to do testing also, that the the code we have written does not affect anything that was not meant to be affected, but only affects the thing that needs to be affected. So that is very important thing. So you will learn about tests when you're going to build some production grade code. And this is npm run eject. So what this is like, since it created our basic setup, everything, but it has hidden, it's like it is an abstraction layer which has hidden it, whatever the setup we need to do. But in some scenario you might need to just uh, tinker around or change around some things that was not going to work for you. But it so what you can do is npm run eject. What it will do is it will remove that abstraction layer that corresponds to current create react app abstraction. So it allows you to actually change whatever the internal working that create react app was using, and allow you to change the settings or configuration, whatever you want to change. So let's come into the directory structure, what it does. So node modules, if you're familiar with node, you must be knowing what node modules are. If you're not familiar with node, so just giving you a basic description. So node modules are whatever the package you download from npm. So we learned about command npm i. So whenever you type npm i and some package name, it will install a package, and that package is always stored in the node modules directory. So every package that you install is in the node modules directory. Now create react app also uses some packages by default. So it has created a node modules directory, and it have installed all those packages that are needed for create react app. Now the public directory contains very little things, and but they're important things. It is favicon icon, the icon that we see on the, so like just showing on the browser, the icon that we are seeing here. This icon is what we call favicon icon. Okay, and index.html. So now index.html. This is the only HTML file you will see in your React app. Like you can manually create any number of HTML files, but when it by default create it is like this. So what it contains some head element where you can like add what your app is, like React app title. You can change of your app, or some URL if you want to change logo or anything, that could be done in this index.html. Now, one very important thing index.html contains is this thing, div id root. So it will always have this. So like basically your React app is nothing, just a div id root. So basically what you will do is when you will look into the React app code, when you go into the source directory, I'll show you what it does. So what this is the element, the root element inside which we will have our all of the components. So like every component, everything that is displayed on the browser screen. So just going in there in this browser. So like everything that is displayed inside this thing is inside the root div, which has an ID of root. So how we do it, we'll get to know when we will look into the source folder. And then just some logos that it creates, like basic React logos we have. And this is manifest.json. It basically tells from where to find your logo, and what how much size is, and what you want to display, and what the color is, and basic things. Uh, so this was public directory. Now coming to the most important directory. Every component, everything, whatever you're going to write in the what do you say in React, like in React app, it will be inside source directory. Anything you're going to write about any React component, any CSS files, anything that you're going to write will be in the source directory. It's just to maintain a directory structure. Good directory structure is always beneficial when code base becomes high. So you should follow this directory structure. It's basically very beneficial. And now this is our main file. Now, basically, what this file is the main starting point of our code. So, if you, since most of you must be familiar with C or C++, or Java, even. So, in those languages, there is a function called main. That is the entry point of your app or your program. Same like that. What you have is this index.js. This index.js is the main entry point of your app. What it is doing is just forget about this stuff. This is just forget about this stuff for now. This is the stuff that first we talk about. So what is it is doing is it is looking to the document. The document is whatever the HTML gets rendered on the page, on the web page. So it is looking at the element which is have an ID of root. Now, if you remember, we talked about index.html. Index.html always has to have an ID of root element. Now, since it is always going to have this, now you can always change the ID. Like you can say like my element, whatever you want to make an id, you can change it, but you need to make sure that if you change id here, you will has to change id here. Otherwise your React app will not be able to render, because it will not be able to find where it has to put all those components that you have included in your React app. Okay, now now comes the important part about what are components. Since we are talking so much about component, what actually are components? So let's just go to our presentation. Now, what are components? So React has basically three things. Three things that are, first is component that we have. This is the thing that is displayed on the UI. State is whatever inside the component is the state, and the props is, if you remember from yesterday, the props are things, if you remember from yesterday, we said like data flow in React will always be from parent to child. So if this is the parent, data flow would be in this direction only. So what props are? Props are the whatever the data parent supplied are called props. Okay. So let's go deep in what are components. So basically, a React app is just like a Lego. So if you have played Lego or something like that when you were kids, so every like if you want to build a castle from a Lego or something whatever you want to build from a Lego, so you will have small pieces of Lego which will be connected together to build that castle or build that to either whatever you want to do. So component are same. Component is a a small Lego in the React world. So in the React world, whenever you think about a component, think about a Lego. A Lego is the smallest thing you can have. Okay, if you are making a toy from Legos, so component is the same. It is the smallest thing that it can have, which will be used, which will be rendered, or which will be shown on the UI. So components are the building blocks of any React application, and a single app have many components. Just like if you're building a castle with Legos, you will have multiple Legos connected together. Same with that, a component, a single React app will like have thousands and thousands of components. If it's like a big app like Instagram or Facebook or Airbnb, they will have like way so like hundreds and thousands of components they could have. And it's very essential because it is what component is. A component is basically whatever you want to display on the UI, it displays that thing on the UI. So it is the thing where you put your JSX. So if you remember from yesterday, we are going to write JSX instead of HTML, because we are writing in JavaScript, and JavaScript does not support directly HTML. So you have to write in JSX. So JSX is basically JavaScript plus HTML. Now, why we use component? Why we require these small blocks? The reason for requiring small blocks. Just suppose With the same example of our Lego, now if our Lego is this big, we can use it many more times. So these are the this is the Lego. These are our Legos. We can use this Lego in many more use cases. Just not the castle or just not what we are currently building. We can use it in every time or any time whenever you want to use it, wherever it fits. Okay. Now suppose you have a big Lego like this. Now it can be used other places, but it is very limited. It is very limited to only places where it is like where you need this much big Lego, which might not be required in most of the places you want to build. So why we do is make components small and more component, because we want to divide our user interface in very small portions. So it has two benefits. It has first benefit is your code is very manageable. When you have like hundreds of components or like very complex page, like Instagram has post on the same page. Your profile bio is on the same page. Your profile picture is on the same page. A number of followers on the same page and stories on the same page. Now these are very complex things. So what we need to do is we need to make this very simple for ourselves. As a developer, we need to make it ourselves simple for ourselves, and also we have to think that if you remember from the previous lecture, that React handles the components in a way that it only refreshes those components which has changed. So if our component are very small components, so like just say this is these four are components, and only the component that changes this, so it will only change this component, not these. It will not even touch these components. So it's very beneficial that user only will see page refresh for very small portion of your web page. Not the whole web page will refresh, only the small portion of the web page refreshes. And you will understand why it is very necessary when you will build a very complex web page, because at that time you will have to look into, like, when one thing changes, you don't want other thing to change. You only want that thing that had any effect or any event happened to change, not the other thing. So that is why we use component, and that's why we make component very small. Okay. So these are some way we write components. So let's go to our code, VS Code, and look at what React app has built for us. By default, it builds us a one component. So now what that one component is, that one component is app. Now that app component is basically the main entry point of your app. Inside this component, just don't bother about these, what these are. These are, like, I will tell you what these are. Once you understand what components are, you will understand what these is. So let's see uh, what the app component is. Now, app component is basically what it is. It's just nothing but JSX component. Okay. Now, this JSX component does so many things. Basically, what happens is just this component is way too complex to now. So let's just start with a basic component that we can make. So currently, for starters, we're going to use class component. What class component are? A class component is nothing more. If you are familiar with ES6 syntax of uh, JavaScript, so what it is, it's just class, and then we will type the class name. So for our class name, this is going to be app, and now we have to import the React. So if you're familiar with ES6 syntax, this is ES6 syntax to import anything from sorry, from React. What I did is I basically, from the React package, I just imported the React component or the React module. Okay. So what we'll do is we have to extend the component class from the React package. Now, what this component class is? Component class is the base class of every component. So, just like in Java or in JavaScript, we have an object. So, like in Java, you have object class, which is the base class of every class. Okay. So and every class need to by default extends it. So basically that's what it is. We are extending a React component class, which is a base class. Okay. So every time you want to write out a class component, you have to make sure that class you use class keyword, then the class name. Then always make sure that if it is a React component, you use extends React dot components. Now you can use different syntax from here, like you could just do this one also. This is like also this is another way you imported React and React component also, and then use that component. You can choose whichever syntax you want. It's just a syntax switchover that you apply in your coding practice. So it depends how you want to code and what you want to do. So this basically created a class. Okay. Now every class component, every React component will have a render function. Now what render function is? Basically, it's just a function, nothing much. It is a JavaScript function. It has to have a name render. Every React component class need to have a function known as render. Okay. Now, every render component must return something at all times. So now, if you don't return it, now since this is syntax highlighting supported by VS Code, we have installed some extension. I'll later on explain which extension are most useful, maybe in the lectures coming on, to just help you to start with basic extensions. So basically, whenever you have a class component, you need to have a render function. It is mandatory to have a render function. You don't need to have anything else. You just need to have a render function. That is mandatory. Everything else is secondary or optional. You can leave it if you want, but you need to have a render function. Always remember that. And a render function will always have a return. No matter what conditions you are having, it need to return something. Because if it does not return anything, first of all, it is an error. Obviously, as you have sent this is an error. This is an error. Okay. And another thing is, if you don't return it, and so nothing gets displayed on the UI, because render function is what displays your UI. Like render function is what returns what the UI should have displayed. So so let's just write something here. Now just make a simple HTML. This is simple HTML if you know. Hello, this is my first React app. Okay, now let's just save it. And now let's run our first React application. Okay. Npm start. If you remember, npm start is the package, is the command which will start our code. So it will take a bit time, and then it will start. This is a starting development server, and remember, it will always be on localhost 3000 port. It will always be there. And as you can see, we can see whatever the text we have written. This is my first tab. Now, remember, whatever you have written here will only be displayed here. Okay, will only be displayed in the UI. So if you have returned nothing, okay, just say you returned null. Now you can return null, obviously, because as you will learn and as you will make big components, you don't have to return sometimes something in that component, because the data that is required for the component is not that. Okay, so we will just save it. It is automatically refreshed, and you will look into the page. Pages also automatically get refreshed. Now, since we removed anything from our component, app component, it will not render anything. It will just show empty web page or a blank page. Okay. So that's what basically a React component is. A React component is basically a building block in which you write your code that need to be displayed in the browser. Okay. One more thing. Whenever you write return and you have multiple elements that to be returned. So like you have this div and you have this div. Now here it is showing error because you cannot return two separate element here. Okay. Uh, so what you need to do is you need to wrap these elements into a parent element. Okay. So parent element could be an empty tag also. So this is an empty tag. Uh, okay. So this is an empty tag, and this will just only act as a parent. It will not display anything on the UI. It will not make any changes on the UI. It will just make this JSX wrapped in a parent component instead of like returning two different components. Okay. So that was about basically what the return does or what the render does. Okay. So let's just to practice some things out. Let's just create uh, some React component. Okay. In this, just going to the source page, and we'll just make a new file. Let's say contact.jsx. Okay. It will be having contact.jsx. We will now write our code for importing React. Okay. This will import React. Then we have to do class. Let's say it is having a name same as the file name. Contact extends React.component. Okay. Now we have done the basic one. Now we will make a render function. A render function will have whatever we want to display here. So let's say we display what the contact details are. Okay. So just make a div of whatever element you want to use, and for now, just we're going to display that contact details. So I'm just going to be my email, my web pages, and Newton. Now we can just wrap it inside an A so that we can be redirected. Just leave that. Web pages Newton School. Cool. Okay, so what we miss is a written statement. So since we missed the written statement, we will be doing and control S. Okay, so this is our contact component. Okay, let's just make one more component, and then I'll show you how to couple up the components in one big component. Okay, so let's just say about component, about.js. Okay, so basically what we do is import React from React, then class. Now, one thing I forgot here, we made a component, but we never exported the component. What exported means is outside of this file, it will be only accessible if we exported it. Okay. So what we're going to do is we export. Now there are two types of export. We have a default export and a non-default export. So what default export is, if we see here, this React one is a default export. How do we know it's a default export or not? Like whenever you import a default export is only single. So you can only have a one default export in the file. You cannot have multiple default export. Okay. So in the React module, in the React file, whatever the file this is, they have done, they have exported React as a default export. Now they have exported many other things, like we have seen this component, and this is also exported, but this is exported as a normal export, not a default export. So that's why we have to enclose it into the curly brackets. Okay. If we do it this way, like export default content, and we will also in the about component we will also do non default export. Okay. So that we can learn about both of those things. Okay. So this will be saved now in about component. Let's just make the component first. Extends via dot component render return this. This is something about me. Okay. So now we have made this component. We have to export it. Now, if we directly just make an export keyword here, it will what it will do is it will do not the default. It's the normal export of the about component. Now you will see the changes when we couple these things up. Okay. Now we have made two components, contact and about, but we have to show them. Currently they will not be shown. If you just make this return and write anything or here, okay, it will not show those components. Okay, until and unless you will couple them into in app.js, because app.js is the only component that is currently showing. Now we will learn about how to show multiple component or how to have a URLs and different things. But for now, we only have one component, and we'll try to couple multiple components to one component. Okay, so we have to use return. Always we have to use return whenever we are coupling anything. So like when you are using other component to be displayed in this component, you have to do it inside the return. Okay, so this is JSX. Okay, so let's just do it. We have to import contact. Okay, so import contact from dot slash contact. Okay, now why we need to do a dot slash here, not this, because this is in the node module, so it is directly taken, but this is in the current directory, so it does not know where in the directory structure of your source it is present. So you have to, anything with the node modules you can directly import, but if you have a directory structure, if you have inside your source directory, then you have to follow its directory structure like this. Okay, so this is contact component. Now we'll be saying just this is this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say this is coupling, integrating, better word, integrating multiple components. Okay, now we'll be integrating multiple components. Since we have imported the contact component, we're just going to directly make a tag which is component. It will be a self-ending tag. Okay, now if you remember self-ending tag like br/, they don't need to have a closing tag. They can directly be uh, 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 they can be self-used. Okay, now if we look at the browser, we have saved this, and if we look at the browser, just look at it. My web page is newtonschool.co. Now, if you remember, contact we have written in contact.js on JSX. This is now let's just couple app about.jsx also. Okay. So now for about.jsx import, if we like try to do the same thing that we did for contact, it is saying there is no export here. Okay, because it is that way exported. Okay, now we will just use this and this will also render a about. Now, hi, this is something about me. Okay, so that is how we couple multiple components together. Okay, and now moving on, we will be moving on to the state. What the state is. So moving on to the state. Now, state is uh, what the state is. State is like state is like a pocket of a component, pocket of a component we can say. Why a pocket of a component? Because it holds whatever the component has, whatever the component wants to keep whenever it is displayed. So whenever, just suppose take your example, okay? So you take a purse, or you have a pocket in your jeans, or in your trousers. So you always take whatever you need, or whatever you think you will need wherever you are going. Okay, like whenever you're traveling in a train, you will take up your ticket and everything. So that's what a state is. State is basically when the component is displayed on the browser, it stores whatever the data that the component needs to store to make any event work, or anything that the component does work smoothly and as intended. Okay, so uh, basically, what's whenever you make any change, whenever you do a click. So if we go to Instagram, so basically, if you go to Instagram and you just click this thing, or log in with Facebook thing, what happens is an event is triggered, and this component, wherever they build up this component, they would have made a state that the link is clicked, and what we have to do is we have to redirect it to Facebook login, or whatever the event has to be. Okay, so what happens is whenever user performs some events, and that events affects the component will so the component logic will only be component logic will have some influence. So like user event will have some influence, or some change that will make the changes in the data. Okay, so that changes in the data might happen in the state. So and this state will always make the state will make sure those changes that are happened because of some event will always make sure the data that is displayed on the browser is accurate according to the what the trigger was. So it influences the output of the component. Now, one thing to remember is whenever state changes, the component refreshes. The component refreshes, or in React world, you will hear many times re-renders or renders. A render is when the component is displayed in the browser. Okay, and a re-render is when the component was getting displayed in the browser, but some event happened that causes internal data to change, or something to change, and causing it to again render. So it is the re-render. Okay, that state is. So we will look at what the state is. Okay, so let's just move to our code, and let's just say uh, with this component, let's say we are having a count component or anything. Okay. Okay. So let's say in our this thing, uh, we will have a button. Okay, and button will have an on-click attribute. Okay, and what we're going to do on when this button is clicked, we're going to handle the click. Okay, so let's just make a arrow function, handle click is equals to, this is a arrow function, and now so we have to define a state first. State is basically you can define this as a state. So whenever you define as a, so like whenever you don't have to use let or where or const here. State is the class variable. So it is accessible. It is accessible with this also. We just define our state here. Now, whatever you want to do, so state is an object. Is an object, JavaScript object basically, and it will have some key value pairs, whatever you want to have. So currently, let's say we have a count variable which is initialized to 0. Now, yeah, you can just make it empty also, no problem with that. But if you have something that needed to be used somewhere in your render function, it is a good idea always to initialize it, so that if in case of some failure, or if in case data did not arrive from the API, or wherever from the data you are getting from, you will at least have it will not throw an error on the web page and make the web page look blank. It will at least show a default thing. It is not correct, but at least it will show something instead of showing a blank page, which will make user look, what is this? I was looking for something, but there is nothing like that. Okay, so we will have a count variable here. Now, this count variable, now you would be thinking this is very simple. We can just make and just use state dot, so like, since this is tied with this, and we can just make it count and then just change this value. No, we should not do that. The reason for we should not do that, because state calls are asynchronous. Okay, we should not directly modify it. They are asynchronous. They should be modified using a method called set state, because if we modify it directly, we will have some side effects. Side effects are we may have changed this thing from here, like here and 9 here. Now in some other function, like say handle double click, we have, okay, and this also changes something. Now just suppose both the functions are called in any way possible, they're called same time, okay, at the same time. So that will be a problem, because this is also changing it, this is also changing it. So the user will have an incorrect data, because we are changing directly, so that will be inefficient, okay, and incorrect also, causing inconsistency. So these inconsistencies are what in the React world are called side effects, okay. So everything in the React world is actually a side effect. Whenever you make a change in the state or in the props, we'll talk about props. It is a side effect. Okay. Uh, so what we're going to use is this dot set state. This is a set state is a function. It's a React provided function, which will always be present in a React class component. Okay. Remember, I'm saying class component. Okay. So what it will do is what you can do is you will just take up an object and modify whatever variable you want to modify. Okay, so let's say this dot state dot count plus 1. Okay, so what we are doing is we are taking the current count variable and increasing it and then setting. Okay. Now let's just on this we will handle this dot handle here. Okay, and let's just display here our variable. Now, why we did it like this? Why we did not do? Why we did not just display directly count variable like this? Why did we use these curly brackets? These curly brackets are required because whenever you write JSX code, and so like this is HTML basically, yeah. So you cannot write directly JavaScript inside these HTML. So what you do is whenever you make a curly bracket, so whenever you start with this curly bracket, you can write any JavaScript you want to write here. Okay, like you calling a function or you using this keyword and then state and then count. Okay, let's just see what it does. Okay, so this is saved. Our browser must have refreshed. Yeah, now this is a button coming. I don't know if it's possible to say or not, but it should be. And we just, whenever we click, this value will be updated. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every time we click, and the value gets updated. Okay. So what is happening is when you click this, the handle click function is that called. Handle click function, what handle click function does is sets the state variable. Which state variable it sets? It sets the count state variable, and that count state variable will what it does sets it whatever the current value you are having, and then increase it by one, and then you get the new count variable, and that is set. Okay. So what happens is whenever this set state is called, this set state function is an asynchronous function. Okay. So it's an asynchronous Java function. It does not get executed. Whatever inside is not executed directly. It is run asynchronously. Okay. So you don't know when that gets reflected in the UI, because if some data is like, it might take different time. You see it instantly in the browser, but internally what it is asynchronous function that does set the state at certain time, or like after some delay, or that like that. Okay. So when this state is set, when this set state function is set to the state, so like initially count was 0, it set it to 1. When this set it to 1, what happens is React will detect that button components text, whatever the text it was showing is has changed now. It is changed from 0 to 1. So what it does, it re-renders only this button component. It will not re-render anything. These components will not be re-rendered because nothing changed there. The only thing changed there is this. Okay. So only thing. So if you look at the UI, we click it. You will see only this thing just having any movement. This is not moving. This is not even refreshing. Page is not even refreshed. And every click. Okay. So this is basically what the state is and how to modify our state. Okay. Now, very another topic, that is props. Now, basically, props. What is props is, if you remember, we always say, I told you that in React, data only flows in one direction. Okay. Now, whenever parent has to tell child what some data, something, or something, it has to somehow tell it. Now, the flow of data is what we call props, which the properties that we pass from parent to child is what we call props. Okay. So let's see in action what the props are. Okay. So just going to code, and uh, so let's see. So this is the parent component of so app component is the parent component of contact and about. Okay. So let's say from app component we want to tell what is the URL that we want to display. Okay. So let's say this is the URL, and we will say like URL is http dot Google or Newton School dot. Okay. Now we have sent this thing to the contact, but sending this property will not do anything because contact does not know what you have sent. Until unless you use it, it will not. It knows what you have sent, but it will not reflect it. Like it will not magically come here. Like HTTP will not be magically coming here because you have not used it. You have not returned that property in the render function. So what we have to do is what we do is this dot props. So whatever you have passed from here is an object. The contact function, the contact component will receive it as an object. In which object? The props object. Okay. So props object. Now you can see the props object will have uh, URL key. So when you do is URL and you save it. So this is saved now. Let's just go. Now you can see http.newtonschool.com. Okay, so let's just make this. Now this was previous version of us. You can see HTTP did not arrive. We still we sent the props, but it will not be displayed because props are not being used in your component. Now, as soon as you use them, you get whatever the props you have sent, and you can use it like this. HTTP Newton School. So this was about props. Now, one thing about props, you cannot change the props. Basically, child component cannot change the props. Parent component can change the props anytime it wants. So like just say this we are sending, we can also send now the count variable that we have. Now, okay, just one more thing. Yeah. Okay. Now we are also sending the count variable, and my website count is now this dot props dot count. So we will try the browser, and you can see count one is showing here. Now, if we click the button, you can see this will show here. The count is also increasing here because the parent is changing the prop. Whenever the parent changes the prop, the component get re-rendered, and when the component get re-rendered, it will display the new props. Okay. So we will learn, we'll understand more about this state and props when we do much more bigger things. For this lecture, this will be it. So what we learned is we learned what state is, what a component is, and how component works, what render function is, how to set state, and how props work, and what how re-rendering happens. Okay. So in the next lecture, we will learn about making multi-page React application, and also learn about something called as component life. Okay. Thank you for your time.